All right. Thanks for tuning back into the Minutemen Initiative. We've got an awesome episode today. We were fortunate enough to have Reaper of Reaper Consultation on the podcast today, and we had a great conversation with him, talked a little bit about what he does and his kind of goals with his educational content that he's been putting out, mainly on Instagram and a couple other places. But specifically, we get into clandestine or covert hunter-killer teams and what that looks like from the modern Minuteman perspective. It's a very valuable insight into this whole perspective as a whole, and I think it's an incredible conversation and a lot of really good wisdom and knowledge to kind of impart on your own team building and team crafting. So very thankful we got to have Reaper on. Big thanks to him for coming out, and I hope you guys enjoy the episode. Jump right into it. Today we have an awesome guest, Reaper. And how are you doing, sir? Can you hear us okay?
I hear you great, and I am doing wonderful today.
Perfect. So thank you so much for coming on. We've been talking about this for a while, and it's been one of those things where it's like, oh, we got to do this, we got to do that. Like I feel like we kept putting it off, not because we wanted to put it off, but because of the technical mountain that we had to climb. We have no idea what we're doing 90% of the time, especially with like the computer side of things. Full transparency, like 5 minutes before you got on the call here, we were on with our brother he's a sound engineer down in Atlanta, or actually Nashville now. And he's like, you got to get this cable. And we're like, what is that cable? He's like, oh, it's just this. And he's saying all these acronyms. And we're like, no, we don't know what you're talking about. And, but thankfully we got it. So hopefully we sound good on your end and you sound good in ours. So I think we're good to go.
Yeah.
But today we're going to be talking about, which you'll be able to explain it way better than me, but a concept you've talked about a lot on your some of your social media and your educational content and stuff like that, which is going to be getting into like some covert teams and how they apply to kind of the Minuteman mission. But before we get into that, if you want, go ahead and maybe introduce yourself and tell our audience a little bit about who you are and maybe get into what your educational content is and different things like that.
So I'm the administrator of Reaper, what is now Reaper Consultations, formerly Reaper 1.1. We're now on like the 5th page after banning.
Resilience.
But what we aim to do is empower, just the common man with the critical thinking, knowledge base, and motivation needed to approach conflict in a 5th generation environment. So we really like to hit on just like basic tactics, long range shooting, guerrilla tactics, and just like keeping it simple. Instagram isn't like an ideal place to teach, so we really just treat it as a place to motivate others to learn, with the hope and goal that we could really realize America as a Minuteman country again.
That's awesome.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, it's kind of a double-edged sword, I feel like sometimes, because Instagram, it's definitely not the best format for educational content, but it's where everybody's at, it seems like. You definitely get the most exposure there. I feel like the more there's a wide array of different kinds of people that are finding content and finding your content. So yeah, it definitely seems like more of a maybe just directing people, kind of like, hey, like you said, motivating. That's probably the best way to say it. It's like, hey, have you thought about this? I'm like, no, I haven't thought about that, but now I'm thinking about it, and you start kind of going down the rabbit hole of like, where's this going to take me? But so how'd you start? Like, what kind of gave you the motivation to get that going and stick with it for now 5 different Instagram accounts?
Really, it's just the desire to empower people, because the more people that are knowledgeable and have that solid base, it just makes our society safer, not just from common criminals or organized crime and advanced criminal syndicates, but even just state-based entities that wish to do you harm.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, me myself, I'm one person, but if you can inspire others who inspire others, like it just starts this domino effect that really generates momentum
Yep.
and can't really stop itself. That's kind of where the whole Fry the Brain book came. Is like,
Yeah.
hey, let's just pick one book that just gets people on this rabbit hole and gets them going. It's not perfect, obviously. There's plenty of holes and bugs within that piece of literature, but just kind of doing things like that, and that's really what motivates me throughout every day. I love doing that and just seeing people like those light switches come on and them just start to take their own journey. People starting to actually understand that owning a firearm doesn't do much for you if you don't actually know how to employ it to its full capabilities.
Right.
It doesn't do you much good if you can't get to X. It doesn't do you much good if you don't have friends. It doesn't do you much good if you don't have a community, et cetera, et cetera. And just it just makes us better off as people, right? We're America. We're not Europe, right? We're a nation of gunfighters and warriors, and that's really what we need to re-seek. And then also the other part of that is it's great to know the sword, but the pen is also mightier than the sword. So that's something we're definitely considering diving more into, right? We don't want to use our arms by any means, nor should we dream of using them in a offensive or defensive manner, but we're prepared to. Ideally, we should use the pen and our tongues to change the world in the way we need to.
Yeah, I love that you said that, because I think, in this genre, if you will, or even in this kind of community, it's very common to be like, well, we're getting ready for the next civil war, or we're getting ready for the next revolution, or whatever. And it's like, no, like we should not be thinking like, yes, we need to prepare. Obviously, if you don't prepare, you prepare to fail. So, whatever that saying is, I think I butchered it, but fail
Something
to prepare,
like that, yeah.
Prepare to fail. Yeah. But it's like, it's not too late. There's a lot we can still do. I think there's this mentality that like, everything's gone to crap. My voice doesn't matter. When I write my senators or my reps, it's nothing matters. And it's like, no, the problem is that nobody's doing it. It's very rare to find that commonplace, find people willing to reach out and talk to different people as a commonplace discipline. And I definitely like what you said there. I mean, a huge part of this community is missing out on being vocal and being proactive in that arena. We still do have a voice. If we fail to use it, then we'll lose it,
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it's huge.
Absolutely. And a lot of the, libertarian side of the spectrum. So if you look at like anything from libertarian night watchman state to like full blown anarchist, right? A lot of these groups, I'll admit it, I'm a part of that kind of area and demographic. We look at putting our voices out there or political action, whether that be something as simple as, again, you say like writing to a senator, anything like that, running for office. And we say like, this is compromising my values because I don't, these people are evil, terrible, or I don't believe this process, et cetera, et cetera. And we really have to take a step back and say, what is the end goal that I want? Right? What is my end goal? And then how do I get there? And if you're not talking, you're not inciting others to your cause or making your cause known, you're just speaking in a vacuum. Like if I talk to you guys and we all share the same views, that does nothing for growth. And what we need is growth. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you see this on like the Twitter sphere. Twitter is really just good for mudslinging and shit talking and me just putting out my thoughts of the day, which mean nothing. But really, if you look at it, it's like it's a big shouting room. And if you can get more noise than other people, you start to swing the pendulum more back to your side because it creates this mass. And some people don't look through, like a lot of us look through the lens of things like, is this logical? Does this make sense? Does this appeal to a higher value? Unfortunately, many people don't look at it that way. They look at it as what's cool, what has masses and how many people. And if you can appeal to that a little bit and make it more commonplace for certain views, tools like firearms, you really start to move the Overton window of society.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's social media is a great example of that. I remember back in man, it's probably been a while now, but back when the kind of gun culture as a whole started getting cracked down on, and on Facebook and Instagram, basically all the meta platforms, everyone there was a large swath of people that kind of went through this motion of, hey, let's move to another platform. Let's just leave Instagram and go here. And it's similar to that concept. It's like, no, because we need to be influencing and having exposure to these ideas, and promoting kind of that Minuteman perspective, if you will, or promoting just independence, personal responsibility, taking responsibility for your own protection and community and different things like that. Those are ideas that need to be promoted in the the big arenas. And that, I think that's how I kind of look at the politics side. It's like, if we all retreat away and stay quiet, it's just going to make way for the complete opposite ideas to come through and really just smother out a lot of these ideas. So, I think it's tough because exactly what you said. It's like, man, our system now is so corrupt. There's so many problems in there. It's all about greed and all this, all this crazy corporate mega structure and different things like that. And it's hard, but we definitely don't want to retreat out of it. I think we need good people in there and involved if we can be. So
absolutely. And you can look at it as like another domain, right? I don't want to just cede ground without like making the other party put in a little bit of energy.
Yeah.
And then on the another note on that is, what are you going to tell your kids and grandkids, right? Look at the French Revolution versus the American Revolution. What is the huge difference between those? And it comes down to a lot of ethics and holding out to the last straw. The American Revolution, you hold out, you use every avenue possible. They're pontificating in the courts and everything, and they know it's not going to work. Like, they're doing it just so they can specifically say, hey, we have legitimacy with our cause. We did everything the way you wanted to, and it didn't work out, and you're still a shitbag, right?
Yeah.
Versus French Revolution says, we're just going to start killing people,
Yeah.
and everyone's getting their head cut off, right? So we have two completely different methods of approaching things, despite both causes having legitimacy behind them. Because you want to tell your kids and grandkids, like, hey, we did everything possible.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we don't want, kind of further on that, I don't want my kids to grow up in a world where they actually do have to implement any of the skills we talk about. I say we as a community, there's so many people out there in the space kind of doing the same, fighting for the same cause, taking different directions and different perspectives. It's really cool. It's actually been really fun to see all the different people and meet all the different people that are out there in the space and really putting in some hard work. But hopefully we don't have to use this stuff. I mean, a lot of this stuff is, man, like it's not fun. It's fun to train and practice, and I think a lot of people look at it through a kind of a glorified lens sometimes, but I definitely don't want war. I mean, there's a lot of levels to that, but everyone kind of views that like Ukraine, Russia type thing. That's something that we should never crave for our communities. I mean, it'd be a terrible thing to have happen. And there's a whole lot of tears before that. And I think a lot has to fail in order for that to happen. But
yeah, and we can oftentimes look at different conflicts and kind of get the wrong ideas of what would probably happen here. Like, Ukraine and Russia is a very interesting example because, let's be honest, the militaries don't compare to like something like the U.S.
Right.
Or I guess debatably China. Right. It's very much in a microcosm. Both logistic networks for those countries is based almost entirely off rail. Ukraine's more truck based, but Russia's has been entirely rail for the last, I want to say, 150 years or so. And we get this idea of like the invasion, the whole Red Dawn situation, and that kind of gets the wrong idea in our heads, in my opinion. Right? We look at like GWAT and we see the plate carriers and stuff, and we say like, I'm going to emulate that. And in some instances, like, that is not a bad thing. Mm-hmm. And by all means, I say like having the tools necessary, like, it's great. However, we should understand the context that's done in, because at the end of the day, let's look at a real threat. cartel activities. Like what is stopping one of the tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of cartels just running through some southwestern town and just taking it over, right? Especially if like we had like the whole COVID situation happen again, where we just have riots and breakdown of society. You can look at like a Kessinger event where you get like satellites knocked out from space debris, or like they're targeted for whatever reason, and you just have like a breakdown, right? Kind of like a Kosovo situation. Like what's stopping an organized group like that from taking over your town? And if you're small in numbers, walking around with a plate carrier is probably not the best idea.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. Right?
Absolutely.
There has to be a different approach to that situation. We can't take our gear and make it apply to the situation. We take the situation, then apply the gear that is correct for that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
You can look at the IRA. The IRA didn't just start walking, patrolling the streets with their AR-18s. Yeah. It didn't happen until they gave themselves sufficient freedom of movement and maneuver that they could actually do that. So we have to understand that, particularly within the first stage of war for something like a minuteman or militia, that first stage is going to be like very covert, very clandestine. You're not going to really have the ability to operate super overtly, nor should you desire to. You just that capacity and capability is probably not there yet. Now, if you had organized your community in time and had like managed that, great. But not everyone has done that, so they might have to revert to those covert and clandestine means. Covert just meaning kind of hidden, clandestine meaning like deep cover. Imagine more like, SOCOM guys dressing in flannels and low-vis gear versus like James Bond.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what started to kickstart this idea of what I call like the clandestine or covert hunter-killer team. Is we like if we had some situation happen right now and you were in a more populated area, or you had to go somewhere where, let's be honest, you couldn't just walk around with your gear on, just due to the situation. Maybe there's 1, 2, or 3 different parties who are just poppy for that, right? Like a semi breakdown of rule of law or just a highly contested environment. You're gonna have to approach the situation differently. And that's kind of what started this idea of, well, how can I create a template that gives guys a little bit more direction on how to approach these issues? And that's where I came up with this. So I did a lot of studying of the Jedburgh teams, kind of looked at the Chechen teams, which I always appreciate, looked at some of the Green Beret stuff, OSS, which was also Jedburgh, but looking at what they did and how they operated, and then looking at the context of like how many guys and what resources does like the average group have, and then started to look at that.
Yeah. And that's why I'm excited to talk about it, because I remember reading that, because you had a few different posts you did in some of your older pages, because I think we started following you on two pages ago, and then you lost that one, and then you built another one and built your followers back up, and then we started following that one, and then you lost that one recently, and actually you lost it mid conversation. We were talking about doing this, and I was like, hey, what do you think about your content on clandestine hunter killer teams? And you just like, you were just gone. And I was like, man, I was like, he was literally right there. Like, where did he go? And then like a day went by, and I was like, I wonder if his page got deleted. And so I messaged.
You actually called me. And I was on my way to work. I think I was working nights or something, maybe. And he's like, dude, I think he just got zucked. And I'm like, really? And he's like, yeah, because like I try to click on his page and it just takes me to nowhere. Like it's just a blank page. And I'm like, oh,
yeah,
man.
Just an Instagram user. And I was like, oh yeah, he's been clandestine hunter killer team.
The last 2 pages I've done nothing. Well, not the one that I had for a day that got deleted, but like the 2 before that, I did nothing. 0 strikes, no warnings, nothing so really weird. Spicy, just gone.
Yeah. I wonder if did you figure out if maybe it was like an IP ban? I know that's a thing where they'll flag your IP address like on your phone and
run out a VPN on a new phone.
Oh, sick.
So yeah.
Clandestine. No, but yeah, that's good. But yeah, I remember looking at that content and I was like, dude, that is solid stuff, because that is way more realistic for, potential things that could happen. Like we were just talking about, I think a lot of people look over the bridge. There's a lot of things that can transpire and that will transpire before you get to a all-out Civil War type vibe, especially
that could be quite a few years of that. Even,
decades even. Yeah. I mean, even looking at more recent examples, a lot of veterans in this community and a lot of guys that spent some time in Afghanistan. For those of you that did, and even for those of you that didn't, you're probably very aware. I mean, the Taliban was not marching around in camo and plate carriers and stuff. They were integrated in their communities and they were living normal lives, and then they were joining into small teams and doing harassment techniques, planting IEDs, jumping the Pakistan border. A lot of Chechen special groups that came in and disrupted, supply routes and different things like that. I mean, it was not a, dudes super overt cruising around, patrol style. It was people that were driving through with their family, and then before you know it, you're getting harassment fire. It's not at all. It wasn't fighting, an asymmetric fighting force by any means. So even that it's still different, but even that recent example, it's like, a superpower, if you will, came into your country and completely took over. And guess what? At the end of the day, we had to leave, and they maintained their country. They got it back in a few weeks after we left? Not even. So, I mean,
basically day of
success. Yeah. So it's a lot of lessons to be learned, just that alone. But yeah, crazy.
Yeah. And I'll definitely preface this with like the gear, like overt gear. So I think like your full battle rattle, like helmet, plate gear, like can and will have a time and place even with this team.
For
it's
sure.
just understanding like, when do you use this?
Right.
Maybe it's not getting to X. Maybe it is getting to X. Like, yeah, if I know that a bunch of shitheads are coming to my cul-de-sac, yeah, I'm tossing that all on. We're raising hell. If I got to rescue one of my boys, I might be just tossing it on. Like,
yep.
But if I have to sneak in somewhere, it's a different story.
Right.
So kind of defining what this is it's basically a small unit with a couple specialized guys who is to remain under the radar, undetected, and is to do one of a couple things. Raise an army into the place they sneak into or the place they're based out of, and then train them. Sabotage and reconnaissance. And then also you can look at assassinations. Yes, we're going to talk about some of the spicy stuff. Those kinds of things. So all the super cool guy stuff that you would think of, but in the proper application. So we're thinking not with a hammer, not with the butcher's knife. We're thinking with the scalpel. And that is like the entire philosophy behind this, right? Limited resources, highly specialized, and then extremely precise with our application of violence.
Cool.
Yeah. That's a great breakdown of that. And I think that's something that, like I said, I think this is something that could be applicable to anybody that, especially if you do have like a small group, and that's something we get all the time. People are like, man, I've only got, so many people. I've got 4 people or, 7 or whatever. And realistically, I think it's important to understand like basic infantry tactics, obviously, like kind of going in line with what you said about all this kit and gear. It's important to know and have. Also, basic infantry and squad tactics and platoon tactics, different things like that are absolutely important to know, at least just for your own knowledge of how they'll be utilized possibly against you. But I think these more specialized skills, and this more precise kind of surgical approach, I think is far more likely, especially kind of under the envelope, if you will, of being pretty covert, and operating kind of in space. So,
well, and let's give a small example before we start diving into what the team actually looks like, right? If I have let's just say an organized crime group, and it's just like 15 guys, I could attack all 14 below the head guy, and we could have all that bloodshed, or I could just decapitate and then see what happens. And now I've only shed one head who is directly responsible for every action that goes on. And maybe, just maybe, the 14 will scatter and not be such shitbags anymore. Or maybe not. But, now I've exposed myself to less risk, less resources, etc., to just remove that one guy. So kind of like thinking like that. Where is my most return on investment?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, no. You go for it.
But breaking down, I gave an example of what like a 4 to 5 man group would look like.
Sweet.
But before I do that, I kind of want to talk about the history. So like there's a history of the Jedburgh teams. Basically what this was, and someone can correct me if I get any nitty-gritty details wrong, but the OSS, basically the predecessor to the CIA, and I think it was like MI5 or MI6, I can't keep them straight, basically said, hey, we want to drop off a couple small teams into Europe to just raise hell, raise armies, fuck you, like your only criteria is to fuck shit up.
Yeah.
And they basically trained a bunch of guys, made them highly specialized, highly independent thinkers, gave them, I think, like HF radios, some weapons, explosives, and then just parachuted them all over Europe. And basically just said, raise armies, link up with the French resistance, and just fuck shit up. And basically they did all of that. A handful of teams got caught, but basically it was an open-ended approach to just sabotaging, assassinating, and raising armies. So think of like what modern-day Green Berets can do.
Yep.
Not just being your own group, but multiplying, causing the enemy to divert resources to where you're no longer at, high reward operations for like assassinations, basically just being like that whack-a-mole, and just doing all these things across Europe to just sabotage like rail lines, all this, and taking that idea, taking what like modern Green Berets do, taking some of the Chechen hunter killer teams, and then kind of looking at us as a culture and society, or just modern developed worlds, and seeing like what else can I look at. One thing I dove into quite a bit actually was like ancient history, with the original Sicarii. And the Sicarii was a Latin for dagger, and that was a term applied to the Jewish zealots in ancient Rome who would basically cloak and dagger. That's where that term comes from. Like up to Roman centurions or turncoats within their own ranks, and just dagger right to the back, disappear into the crowd, and basically they were just covert assassins.
Dang.
They do covert reconnaissance, and then I also looked at like what ninja did. And ninja, we always envision like these black-clad dudes sneaking around houses. Realistically, they just dress like normal dudes, or like poor men sitting on the street, or like royalty. Collect a lot of intelligence. They could go out in the hills and do route reconnaissance. They could do sabotage by enemy lines. They could forge letters. They could set people up so that the person they set up looks like an actual spy and they get killed. They can work themselves into positions of power. So all these two things start to formulate into this one kind of role, which I call the Sicarii or the Shinobi, of this covert, close range kind of guy who can just blend into the city. So think like Ed Calderon, like the stuff he does, right? Seer, analyzing people, just kind of like a man of the streets, but not just a guy who's lowly. Like he can work his way into the richest country club and look like he belongs there. A guy who's very moldable, crafty, and very, very good with the social judo. So these traits and these skills start to organize themselves into the Sicarii. And then I also look at like lockpicking and stuff like that, which the ninjas of Japan were very good at, actually kind of pioneered in their own way. And this formulates into a guy in your group who could basically, if you had to infiltrate into a city, could walk around the city, look like he belongs, collect human intelligence just by talking with people, work his way into crowds, capable of close range assassinations. I mean, look, we just saw one in Japan that was successful and one in Japan that was unsuccessful recently. It's actually kind of ironic.
Yeah.
You even think of the guy who took his katana and just sliced it through that communist guy, and I think it was in the 60s. But like a guy like that, like a guy in the streets who could is very moldable, capable of plenty of things. And I look at this kind of person as a guy who can do quite a bit of damage physically, but also who can long term just collect a lot of information for you that is very useful. If that makes any sense.
Yeah. No, it makes a lot of sense.
And a lot of guys look at a group and they say like, hey, we'll have a fire team leader, you'll have your rifleman, we'll have a DM, and we'll have, a grenadier or machine gunner. And they're approaching it like the US military would, which would be like, like we're going to march onto here, get dropped off from helos. And it's like, you just don't have those resources. Like if we go back to the cartel example, like they take over your city and you have to make it in there because your family's there. But you need to get those guys out of the enemy now, out of the city, and kick them out. Like, how are you going to do that?
Yeah.
And this group would basically be like infiltrate into the city, set up shop somewhere, rotate shop and move every once in a while. And then just like, you got to figure out the situation, you got to plan, collect intelligence, and like develop a mission on your own. Yeah. You got to figure out how to read people, read cultural cues, figure out who's the enemy, who's the leader, and just be smart about everything. And ideally, like start raising an army, start doing hits and stuff like that, sabotage operations, and just staying mobile, where you're just kind of attriting the enemy, but in a highly specialized and informed, cognizant way, not just like, we're going to take pot shots every once in a while, like really getting a idea and concept of like what the beast and organizational structure of the enemy you're trying to attack looks like, and then attacking its weak points. Because you have limited resources. If we're talking like 4 to 5 guys, maybe even 3 to 6 guys, right?
Yeah.
Which is very limited on manpower. Yeah, it's different than walking into town with 50 guys. Like if you have 50 guys, maybe operating a little more conventionally would be perfect. But with smaller groups like this, squad and below, it's just not really going to cut it. For that example, obviously.
You also got to take into account that all 50 of those guys got to be tracking kind of what's going on. So it's not like, hey, let's just throw it together in like a time of crisis. You're going to have that prearranged. So it's not like, hey, me and Jacob got a group, but, it decides, we have our fallout or whatever happens. Something happens. Let's just say the cartel, they come in, they decide to take over. There might be a ton of people in my community that would want to, take over the situation, but unless everyone's tracking what's going on, it's not like you can just attack it like a conventional army would, even if you had the numbers to pull that off.
Yeah. And you can look at it like how the Vietnamese would sneak into cities to basically attack the city from inside and then attack outwards, forcing the enemy out of the city instead of attacking outwards, inwards, and trying to repel them. And they just sneak in through tunnels, dressing as old ladies, dressing as like pretending to be disabled, sneaking in on trucks, like get creative, right? You can look at like how people snuck across the Berlin Wall in cars, right? I just need to get in there. But circling back to roles, like the end goal of the Sicarii is like get the information you can't get from just sitting in a hide. Be crafty about getting into places, and then if needed, be able to dispatch people from a close range. Because if you think about it, like a large force that takes over an area needs to integrate with the population. So if you look at like GWAT, right? The army needs to start talking with like locals. They can't just sit in their bases and do nothing. That doesn't win popular support. So in like this situation, like what you'd see is like what the Taliban or like even Al Qaeda would do was like attack those soldiers from like close range. So now neither the people nor the soldiers want to interact with each other because people feel like there's violence every time they interact with soldiers, and the soldiers like have no idea who in the crowd's going to try to shoot them. Yeah. So like it's basically just forcing the enemy to stiff arm themselves from the population and just separating themselves so that they're no longer interacting. The next guy I like to talk about is like this RTO kind of capability. And bear in mind, when I'm talking about roles, they're just a general concept. Like, if it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you.
Yeah.
Cool, great. Like, this isn't supposed to be cookie cutter. Like, oh, you're going to be this guy. You're going to have these exact skills. Like, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
It doesn't work with any small unit tactics. Like if you're a small unit, everybody's got to have multiple hats and be competent, very competent at each one of those. And I think that's not to cut you off, but I think that little piece is just so vital to understand. And I think a lot of people that are kind of moving this direction do kind of naturally gravitate towards, hey, I'm a DM, or I'm a I don't know, an RTO or whatever. And it's like, yeah, absolutely. Like you need to know how to do that. And if you're really a really good marksman, then yeah, maybe you should be kind of carry an SPR or something like that, if that's the mission. And here's all these other things that we need to focus on too. You don't have the luxury.
Well, Steven, let's say you're sneaking into a hide with a big bag. You could have any costume you want on, and I walk up to you and say, hey, like, do you live here? What's in that bag? And like, you just like,
yeah.
Red light. And like, you can't talk your way out of that. Be like, hey, haven't I seen you? Like, if you came up to me like, hey, haven't I seen you around before? And like, just start putting me on the defensive, and like, you can talk your way out of that. Like, a lot of guys can't do that.
Yeah.
If you had to do something and you can't talk your way out of a sticky situation, like, God help your soul, because you're fucked.
Well, and honestly, with our current, the current generation of like, everyone's so used to just communicating through their phones, and no one's having face-to-face conversations, at least not as much anymore. I feel like there is a little bit of a social barrier when it comes to that, at least I think especially for the newer generation coming up, but even, my generation, I would say a lot of people have poor social skills. And unless you're dealing with like lots of confrontation, like, police officers are really good at like flipping the script on you and stuff like that, because they have to do it every day. So they get lots of practice at it. They're not usually that good at it when they first start, but the more time you spend speaking with people and having to kind of deal with that, the better you get. So
yeah, exactly. And like, you got to balance the skills across the board. Like, everyone, I always talk to the Pareto principle, like 20-80 or 80-20, right? All of your guys should be 80% competent in pretty much any of the skills. Yeah. And that only takes 20% of the effort to get there. Whereas that other 20% of the skills takes 80% of the effort to become an expert. So that way, in case one of your guys goes down, you're not totally screwed. Yeah. You can compensate for that and start to adapt, or maybe you find yourself in a situation you didn't plan for and you can just improvise. But like, the social skills should not be understated at all, especially like if you're going to go and quote unquote raise an army and train guys, and you can't be a smiling face that people like.
Yeah.
No one's going to want to fucking follow you.
Yeah.
Jacob's my smiling face. I just put him out there. He's the talking head.
Yeah. Like,
That's
if you
so
can't
true,
disarm
though.
people immediately with like a nice smile and just chat about like the person you're talking to, like it becomes so difficult. And again, socializing isn't everyone's forte, or they don't like it, but you should at least be capable of that.
For sure.
Yeah,
you got to be able to. It's definitely a personality thing. Some people are just natural at it.
Yeah.
They're just conversation makers. They can just talk, and it is really funny. Like, there's been times I've intentionally tried to get information out of people, like really passively, just through conversation. And it's amazing if you get somebody disarmed and comfortable, they'll just start sharing everything with you. Everything. Like,
or even uncomfortable. If you get people really uncomfortable, they'll also start talking.
Oh yeah, they just word vomit. They're just like, yeah, I do this, and this is how old I am, and this is my social security number. You're just like, whoa, dude.
What are the last 3 digits on your credit card?
Yeah. Let me here. You can just have my card. No.
But it's weird, like if you think you had to set up a hide in the apartment building, you had to sneak into some enemy depot and pass it off. Like, if you could pull off like a dickhead thing and just be like, hey, I need to be here, like everything. But on the other end, like, usually being a little charismatic, usually butters people up quite a bit and just makes it feel happy. Especially if you start talking about them and be like, Jacob, I really like your shirt, man. Like, where'd you get? Do you do push-ups? Shit, man. What's your fucking workout routine, dog?
My ego's being fluffed. Oh man.
But you can do stuff with like that with people, or they like, they question you, like, hey, what are you doing here? You're like, man, I really appreciate how dedicated you are with your job.
Yeah.
Nice.
But like, some people think it's so cliche, but it does work. And like you can just throw a wrench in someone's approach to you and just throw something at them that kind of gets them disarmed, it gets them off topic. And just keep leading them along. So like social judo is an absolute must across the board for all of these people.
Yeah. And it's something you can practice. Like there might be people listening that are like, I have no idea how to even start. It's like, just have intentional conversation. Like go into a conversation with people you know. That's the easiest place to start. I mean, maybe don't just say, hey, I want to practice social judo. Like that's going to be really awkward. But if you just start having a pretty standard conversation with somebody, like plan out ahead, like, okay, I only know what I'm going to try to get out of this, but I have intentional points I'm trying to hit in this conversation.
Yeah.
And just try to do that. And 90% of people you talk to are going to be none the wiser. Maybe if you're super awkward, they're going to be like, what are you doing? Like, why are you acting so weird? Like if you're just super intimidated and scared.
You got a touch of the tism.
Who better to start with though than somebody you know and you're already comfortable with,
My mom says I'm a very special boy.
Yeah.
Hey man, you can pull that you can pull that card as well. Sometimes you can get information that way. They're like, this guy's not going to spread this.
Yeah. Just acting dumb. That's true.
Well, an easy thing is like talk about other people and then take genuine interest in them.
Yeah.
Like, really get down to like what makes them tick. What do they like? A lot of times we'll see something like, I don't know, like if you say like, hey, I like to eat salmon, and you are a salmon hater, you're like, why? That's stupid. Why would you like? Take interest. Maybe that's if you're not even trying to be malicious or deceitful, like at the very least, like let guys enjoy things.
Yeah.
Just take interest.
Yeah.
Like, even if it's stupid. On the other hand, like maybe they're an enemy and like they're just into shit that's just evil. Yeah.
Right.
Mirror them just for a second to get what you need to get.
Yeah.
Just be a mirror to them. Be like, oh yeah, tell me about that.
Right.
That's an easy thing to do. Is you don't even have to like disclose your position. It's just like, hey, tell me more about that. I'm interested. And people just start rambling because they love to hear their own voice.
Yeah. That's so true. Yeah. I mean, even if you take I've noticed too, if you take kind of a neutral position in that same kind of vein, it's like, dude, I'm undecided in this. Like, what? You sound pretty confident. Like, why do you feel that way or whatever? Then they're like, oh, I get to win this guy over. Like, this is going to be my victory. And little do they know you're completely opposite. Like, you're like, okay, I'm going to get all this information, So.
Yeah. I can just imagine it's like the, what was it? Like, there's that one meme where it's like the kid like, I'm so happy to wake up today, and there's like this just giant beast behind him. Yeah. It's like seeding the little battle that you're talking about to win the war, and like they don't even know.
Yeah. Scary stuff. It's crazy too when you like if you're able to kind of have conversation like that, you'll a lot of times can pick up on somebody that is. Well, sometimes I feel like I read too much into it, but I've definitely had conversations with people where I can feel like they're trying to do that, and then you can start to go deep into the like Inception game where you're like, I'm giving them information, but then you're always like, maybe that's what they want, But it's like you're strategically kind of doing this back and forth, but
just feeding them all the wrong information.
But and then you're like, wait, is that being done to me? And it's like this endless loop, but yeah, I think that's such a valuable, super underrated skill, and it's something that we can all work on. Like you said, there's obviously people that are more natural at it than others, but if you are, I would say like lean into that. Get good at that, get better at that.
And usually, if you're good at it, you enjoy doing it. Like I'm not a big talker. Let's be real. You guys maybe hear my voice like I don't know. An eighth of the podcast recording of all my of all our recording. So I'll sit here and I'll just listen. I'm good at listening.
That's good too.
Jacob, here's the thing: you don't even have to talk much. You can just ask those bait questions that lets them keep rambling on, and like at the end of the conversation, they'll be like, "Man, that guy was so conversational. He asked so many questions." He's like, "You just asked 2 things." You're like, "Hey, tell me more about that."
That's actually you are good at that.
Yeah,
but yeah, that's true.
Yeah, Steven, you're getting Inception on you. Jacob's running the show.
Yeah.
Steven's just over there asking the actual good questions, and I'm over here just blubbering.
That's what we do at SHOT Show too.
That's true. We actually debrief like after we have a big conversation, because I'll do a lot of the talking, and then afterwards I'll be like, Steven, what did they say? Because I'm like, you're always trying to keep the conversation progressing, and there's little things I'll miss, and then he's like, yep, this is all the details. I'm like, nice. But yeah. So kind of, I guess, continuing on that, you started to, we kind of derailed a little bit, but I think it was a valuable direction to go. But talking about that, you started getting into RTO positions.
Yeah, and it depends on what your group structure looks like. So if you had like a large group and you were sitting in a small group to do something, the RTO should definitely have something like an HF radio to talk farther.
Yeah.
At least that's what I think initially. But at the very least can organize comms plans, and not just like radios, like thinking like with cell phones. So acquiring cell phones, burner phones, making sure they're sterile, a no contact plan, brevity codes. That's huge. Call signs, doing any encryption on any encrypted radios you're running, general understanding of radios. I would also say should run a, what is the thing called again? It analyzes the radio spectrum. Device called Terminal Armament Cell Phone. Why am I forgetting?
SDR?
Yes, SDR.
Software
be able to run
radio.
those just so you can get a kind of lay of the land. So if your enemy uses certain radio frequencies or they're even unencrypted, you can figure out what they're talking about, where they're saying it, what times they're saying it, and build a kind of a digital lay of the land and understand them better. And maybe maybe you have the capabilities to jam those and just kind of cause a little havoc here and there, just a little poking the tiger, see what makes them tick. Maybe it's more listening in and just gathering intel, finding out where they're at so you can direct an attack. So just thinking like bigger picture as well. If that makes sense. The amount of skills I wouldn't say is like extremely vast, but they are highly specialized, and it definitely takes someone who's skilled in that area.
Yeah, that's what we always say. It's like you kind of almost, in order to be really good, I think from like I just say radio because it's just kind of a blanket statement, but like radio, you kind of have to have that interest. Otherwise, you're not going to put in the effort needed to be like that specialty position and to get really, really good at it. Then if you have something like that, then they can teach kind of everyone else, and kind of dumb it down to your, lowest common denominator.
Yep.
Yeah. And just organizing how are we talking with each other? When are we talking with each other? What language are we using to talk with each other? So you can even get as far as like, verbal brevity codes in person. So you could just say something that means I'm in trouble or do something that means I'm in trouble. So thinking of all those contingencies, like what happens if we're captured? How do we contact home to let them know that we're stuck and need help? And you can go so far as like those old OSS like tap radios that you can make with like freaking beer cans and a battery. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that is kind of a little nerdy, but like a guy who has those tools and skills, like, man, that is such a valuable asset to have, because now you can organize, you can spread guys out and stay in communication with them. You can gather the intelligence of how your enemy's doing that, maybe even get numbers count that you wouldn't normally be able to get just sitting in a hide site reconnoitering the enemy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think if you're able to use these things in conjunction, that's where you really start to get that full spectrum intelligence gathering, because I think there is a place for like very forward, kind of near hostile environment, more traditional reconnoitering positions, whether it's a serve site, whatever. And then if you're able to overlap with like this covert, integrated intelligence gathering as well, with like kind of that more of this clandestine asset, like what we've been talking about. The combination is invaluable. And I think this is naturally just going to focus a lot on intelligence gathering, because this whole concept really only works if A, you have intelligence, and B, you have the logistical planning prior to be able to pull this stuff off. I mean, all the brevity codes and different things you're talking about, and radio transmission plans, different standard operating procedures for just general communication, not even just radio, but just communication in general. These are things that have to be drilled and planned prior to this kind of thing unfolding, So I think for those of you that are working towards any kind of team, these are topics you should absolutely be delving into, because they'll dovetail into a ton of different areas. It's not just like, well, this is for this one thing. It's gonna work for a lot of different things.
Yeah. And then think of this guy teaching other people how to use radios or communicate with each other. You could think of like the 80-20 rule. How can I prevent the catastrophes that normally happen when people start using communication devices like radios or cell phones? What gets them caught?
Yeah.
Think of like just how to prevent an enemy from basic radio direction finding, just understanding the basic emissions control. Yeah. That is such a big thing that if you give people that little bit of information, prevents like the most common failure point in usage of devices. Similarly, like you could look at like, hey, if you're going to teach someone to be, a shooter, shoot from depth. Don't shoot from a fucking window so your head's hanging out and then you get you get your head ventilated. Yeah, like just something like simple like that, where it's just a little like very simple information, but prevents like stupid mistakes.
Yeah.
And like him being able to do that for communicating is wonderful, like such a wonderful asset to have.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Yeah. I think, that's a great example that you use too, because it's not just, it's a small piece of information that promotes a drastic change in results. So you go from being an idiot that's hanging out of the window that, is now breathing through an extra tube in his face, to literally not being identifiable. Like, there's time after time of, a successful, skilled marksman can sit back in that window and remain undetected for long periods of time, and be a great deterrence to a large force, and that's just, I think that analogy is perfect, because the little things matter. The little details are huge. And if you're doing all these little things great, it's like your operational effectiveness is just drastically improved. And you can just continue doing it. I mean, and there's time after time of historical example of like, specialty teams that are operating in complete, maintaining that kind of cloak and dagger, if you will, that covert status, but having major effect on, even large logistical operations. So
yeah, just imagine the fear that these people strike if they're walking around your town smiling faces and everyone loves them, and in their free time, they're put on that balaclava, toss on the gear and go fuck shit up like that.
Yeah,
that is a scary asset. Like, you want to talk about people who could plan, communicate, and execute violence with extreme precision like that, and then all doing it, afterwards, smiling face, friendly guy. Like, that is scary. That is actually scary.
Yep.
Which leads me into the next thing, is like your leader. And again, these roles are just kind of a template to throw. If they don't work for you, they don't work for you. So, such as life, say by be. But these are just kind of covering some bases that give you this diversity for a group. But the leader should be well versed in intelligence preparation of the battlefield, planning. So with IPB, like PMSC PC, which is just breaking down like the basics of your environment, like the political, the military, everything like that, every asset of the cultural, physical, and social landscape of which you're in. Being able to lead and plan. So planning, understanding like full op words, and not necessarily just doing it the way the military does, understanding that, like, hey, to actually plan things and understand what we're doing, what bits of information and intelligence do I actually need? What constitutes information? What's intelligence? Intelligence is processed information, right? Not all information is useful.
Yep.
Guy's got to be smart. He's got to be slick. He's got to be capable of everyone else's job. He's got to be able to put his emotions down in a deep black hole and just like get the job done. It's basically a service position. Like, you are there to serve your guys. You're there to suffer for them. And you're there most of all to be the smiling face for everyone around into the area you have moved into. Think of like, this guy could be like training others. Right. Kind of like that politician who always smiles. Everyone loves him. He's great. He's Mr. Popular. He doesn't necessarily have to be that, but it definitely would open up some more options for winning people over to your cause. Because at the end of the day, like, you can't just be fighting a kinetic battle, you have to be fighting the political one as well. Yeah. So he also helps organize political campaigns. He's kind of also like a political officer, starting to get together propaganda stuff or a propaganda plan. Like, if you're going to do something and execute it a certain way, maybe it might be worthwhile to film it, photograph it, or push some information off to a third party to get ready to print it off or put it on social media to kind of get the ball rolling in the social sphere. Maybe get together what their goal is, what their mission statement is, to start to make their name known. Or maybe they just want to be silent about everything they do and completely in the dark. That's also a way to approach things, but it doesn't work forever. It's good for certain applications. But he's got to be a jack of all trades. He's got to be able to adapt, plan, lead, train others, socialize. He's really he's a walking Swiss Army knife. Like, that's what this guy has got to be. And he cannot be stagnant at all. Like, there's no room for error, especially in that position. Like, he's got to be able to say, like, hey, this is the lay of the land. This is what we thought it's going to be, but it's completely different now. Cards are stacked against us. We got to adapt. Here's the plan. Be decisive with it. Be smart about it, and lead from the front.
Yep.
That's what I got to say about that. Like, if that makes any sense for you guys.
Oh, for sure. I think, that is such a vital role. I think big things there is, obviously you're talking about somebody that's probably pretty charismatic, or at least has good charisma, confident, natural leader. But the good or the important trade-off, I would say, is able to check their ego at the door, because a lot of times what comes with that very confident, charismatic, kind of friendly face, is a manipulative, egotistical side. And that's a pretty natural, I guess, culmination that you see. And so you've got to be able to, I guess, as a personal trait, really set aside that ego, and because it's just going to get in the way, and it's going to cause a lot of problems.
Yeah, it's not a power position; it's a service position.
Absolutely,
that's what it is.
Yeah,
your customers, the people you are serving, are everyone you're leading.
Yep.
Period. End of the day. Like, this isn't a discussion. Like, that's what it is. Like, you want to be a leader, you be that Andrew Jackson leading his guys from the front as a general. Yep. You don't be that shithead general while he sends 10,000 of his guys off to die. Like, look at modern leadership today in, like, the military. Like, it's pathetic.
Yeah,
like,
it's trash.
I remember, what was it? Saving Private Ryan or one of those. Like, there was I think it was like a 1-star, like, just leads an assault and just like fucking does his thing, because like that's what you do, like, as a leader. Like, tough cookies, man. You want this position, you're gonna have to suffer for it.
Yeah.
That's how this game is played. If you want to sit back and just, shoo off your little servants to go die, like, rot in hell for all I care, because you're not a leader. Like, you're a piece of shit.
Well, that only works for short periods of time. People like that, especially when things get so hard and so drastic, they'll have no love for you. They're not gonna maintain that. It's very rare for a leader like that to maintain any kind of leadership capability and any kind of effectiveness, because it's like you'll see through that.
Yeah, and it doesn't necessarily mean you got to be like leading the charge, but you better be in the thick of the shit. Like you better be in the trenches, like doing everything you can. And it just makes you more effective as a leader. When people see you like just balling out and hustling, like they will follow you.
Yeah,
because they will respect the effort you put forth to take care of them. Really, Sun Tzu or like Jesus Christ, you just got to treat people like your children.
Yeah.
Love them as like they're your sons, and they will literally die for you. And it's not a masochistic thing. It's not a psychopathic thing. It's just like you got to be ready to like suffer for them, and they will also suffer for you.
It's brotherhood. It's true camaraderie. That's like, that's the goal. That's what you need. You need to be willing to lay your life down for the men to your left and right, and if you're willing to do that, oftentimes they'll be willing to do the same. Kind of jumping back to another kind of area you touched on for a second was winning people over to your cause. I think that is like so valid and important. And that's kind of where you get into that hearts and minds thing, where it's like, I think it's, because I think you mentioned something about you can kind of stay in the shadows. That's a way to do it, but it doesn't work for long. And I like that you mentioned that too, because something else that kind of goes hand in hand with the team stuff, like, and we've had a lot of conversations about this with people. Like, should I stay super covert and not let anybody know who we are? Obviously you need to maintain operational security. Like you have to, especially if this is something you're working on now. Like I always like to attribute it to like, what can you do now to prepare for, the possible future. You've got to maintain operational security. I think a sense of vagueness around what you do is really important. But then there's another aspect where you and, at least when I say you, I mean your group needs to be viewed in a positive light early. This is something that if you are talking about doing good for your community, it's not very likely that if you just come out of nowhere and you're just this group of people that are like, we're here to save the day, and it's like, who are you? No, like, we don't want you here. If you get rejected by your own community, then you'll have no effectiveness. So I think really focusing on that hearts and minds aspect, if you will, and trying to win over people to your cause and like your motivation, I think that's so important as well.
Absolutely. And like there's multiple ways to skin a cat here. Like you could have your organization fully overt and doing like positive things to the community, or no one could know about it and you're just, again, I always say this, the friendly faces everyone knows, right? You're just a happy guy. You help mow your neighbor's lawn, you shovel snow for the lady down the street. Like it's that simple.
Yeah.
Like just do little acts of kindness. Hell, you want a really easy one? Go around your neighborhood and pick up trash.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do it a couple times. Do it like once a month. Like people will start to take notice. Hey, what are you doing? Oh, I just saw trash around here. This is my neighborhood. I'd like to take care of it. Oh, wow, man. And then capitalize it. Go introduce yourself. Get to know their name and then strike up a conversation and remember the details. It's really important. Remember their name and remember 3 important details about them. And that way, next time you see them, you can bring up something that you talked about last time and it makes them feel so special. And that way you're not just doing something, you're actually like you're building up, right? We're actually accomplishing something. We're gaining momentum. We're gaining ground, right? It's 3 facts in their name. Like it's so important. And if it's a name that's really tough to pronounce or spell, get your phone out because I know you have it, and ask them, "Hey, could you pronounce that for me?" And people with complex names will love you to death for that, because a lot of people, like if you had some Polish name that you can't pronounce, right? Like last name, and you just say, like, people always abbreviate it, and you take the time to pronounce their name every time you see them. Hey, Mr. XYZ, they will love you. Man, you've just won that person over.
Yeah.
Then, if catastrophe strikes, you have at least a little bit of ground for that person. You have at least a couple of kudo points for that person to cash in at some time. Right? Think of like James Bond, right? He puts all his time and effort into people, and he just tons of energy just to capitalize it for this one small thing. And maybe it's a little bit of terrible ROI, but you do this with a lot of people and it really starts to build up. And it does take a lot of energy, but do you want to put that in? Like, if you're not putting in this energy, your enemy is. Yeah. So, nut up, buttercup. But it's just doing simple things like that. Like, get to know the deli lady you see every week when you get your ham sandwich made. Like, just do little things like that. Just become a common, friendly face around the places you go to. It's not complicated. It just takes a little effort. That's all it is. Effort's free.
Yeah.
Right? Sweat saves blood.
Absolutely. And it's, you keep saying the comment, be that friendly face. And I think literally, like, it's amazing how much different a conversation can go if you make eye contact and smile at people. That's something that I just try to do. I mean, I'm a Christian. I try to live a Christian life. And so that's something that, cause my wife always tells me, she's like, you have a really, your resting face is like really serious and intimidating. And I'm like, what? And she's like, yeah, you have this like kind of scowl on your face all the time. And so I have to intentionally try to like raise my eyebrows a little bit, smile at people and kind of have that joyful inflection in your voice. Like, hey, how's it going?
Yeah.
And if you do that, even just going into the gas station, like I have a gas station I go to, I get my Celsius energy drinks, from every day, and they know me. They're like, hey, what's up? And we make a smile at them. They smile at me. It's always friendly. It's never like an awkward thing. So even that, I mean, simply just literally smiling and making eye contact and just being somewhat joyful. It takes, like you said, no effort at all. It actually makes you feel better. So if you're doing that all over the place, everywhere you go, like you said, your individuals in your team, it's like, it doesn't need to be this is our team and look at us do this. It's like, no, if every individual within that group is doing that all the time, and just being intentionally socially investing in their local community, then that's going to pay dividends. It's got to.
And here's where this starts to tie in. Let's say worse things happen, right? I don't necessarily need them to know they're a part of my organization. Yeah.
Right.
I can literally just utilize that connection to kind of get bits of information about what's going on without them even realizing I'm part of a larger group and doing something. Yeah. So like you think of like the guy you buy the Celsius from, like, hey man, what's been going on? And he starts to lay out like some things he saw like yesterday, and you just keep asking some prior questions, and it's not a big deal because you talked with him before. So for you to ask more detailed questions, not a big deal. Like, yeah, he's having a conversation with you, he likes you, not a problem. Whereas if you didn't know him, you start prodding, he might kind of cant his head at you and think you're a little weird.
Yeah.
And you could basically have this entire intelligence network of people telling you all these things and being your eyes and ears without them even realizing it.
Yeah, you can look at supply chain issues like you're talking about, like stores, managers. They're going to be able to see like, hey, yeah, we got influx of, we actually getting more of this, or we're getting way less of this, or hey, there's a lot of new phases, or, little things like that. The more people you can communicate with, even, currently in your current state, the more intelligence you're going to have on what's going on in your community. But yeah, I can agree more with you on that.
Yeah, and again, it's one thing for people to tell you something online or to watch a video about something. It's another to get that like firsthand, like, hey, here's what's going on. Like that's completely different. So it's just understanding that, like, and again, it's not like a sociopathic way to approach it. It's just like, hey man, like we have things we need to accomplish. Like we're being kind, we're being genuine about being kind. But we are going to utilize our connections in a way that will benefit us, because at the end of the day, your enemy's doing the same thing and they don't have your noble goals.
Right?
Yeah. So the leader plays a big part of that, definitely. And if you want to consider yourself a leader, which any of us should, especially for the listeners, like you definitely need to be doing this, period. Like the whole like, well, I'm not good at this. Like if you give yourself excuses, like your enemy's not, he doesn't give a shit.
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah. It's scary. It's a scary reality. That's something that they always said in the military, like you better train as hard as you can because your enemy is, that's, it's true. There's always somebody out there that is training to kill you or destroy your idea.
Mm-hmm. So if we want to talk a little bit more about socialization, so like just general things, like appearance is huge. It's massive. Yeah. If, as you said, like if you have the scowl on your face, like probably not a good thing to do. All you have to do is just wave and like a slight smirk, and like that's good enough if someone's just walking by in the street and you're driving by. Yeah. But also like grooming standards, like if you are smelly and you stink, like what does that say about you? Now, if you want to do that because you want to look like a homeless man, yeah, great, perfect, awesome, do that. Wash yourself and piss, go for it.
That's so dedicated. I love
it. You have this first appearance, yeah, and if you are out of shape, you're not dressed, you're dressed, really scummy, you smell. That says something about you. And at the end of the day, we could talk about like, oh, it's so superficial. Yeah, I might agree too, but other people don't.
Yeah, true.
So like, tough cookies. So be in shape, because if you are active, like in shape, right, you got some muscle on you. If you have a more, say, radical opinion, people are more likely to take that well because you actually have the physique to back it up. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're built like a freaking twig because you don't eat your protein shakes, or you need to go for a run and do some push-ups, like people aren't going to take you seriously. Like that's just the way of the world. Like you're a man, take care of yourself.
Yep.
Or a woman, like take care of yourself.
Yep.
Not just to be taken seriously for your opinion, your stances, and as just a person, but also just for your health, man. Like there's no need to be 50 looking like you're 70. We're not going to be young forever. So definitely taking care of your physique, eating healthy, grooming standards, brush your teeth. My God, where's the freaking deodorant? So that's huge. Smiling is another big one. It doesn't have to be like big cheesy smile, but just grinning every once in a while, having a soft, mellow face to yourself.
Just those super awkward AI smiles. Like, you're like, whoa. Yeah. Just what in the Mark Zuckerberg is going on?
Just like one of those like billboard ads you see.
Yeah. What's going on in the community? And you're like, whoa, that guy's crazy. Yeah. Oh man, it's so true.
Attire definitely says something about you as well, though. It doesn't have to be anything crazy, but just be aware if you're making a first impression. Do keep that in mind. Like if you're going to a poor community, probably not best to wear your Gucci suit. Yeah. If you're walking through, I don't know, freaking Orange County in California through some rich neighborhood, like probably not best to look like really crummy. Yeah. So just keep in mind those first impressions. You only get one shot.
Yeah. That you touch on a big one there, like understanding the social norms of where you're at. Because like for here, for example, in Kenai, Alaska, it's a fishing town. It's a working town. Like if you walked around with, like a really nice 3-piece suit on or something like that, people are not going to talk to you. Like they're going to be like, that guy's weird. That guy must be from,
they're
New
not
York.
from here.
Yeah. Or something like that. But if you're walking around in like Carhartt's work clothes, you got work boots on, and people are going to just be like, yep, that dude lives here. So it's very, very important to know where you're at.
If you're kind of concerned, like, hey, like jeans and a nice flannel shirt will pretty much get you anywhere.
Absolutely.
Like it says, I'm humble, but I also kind of want to look a little classy Americana. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Classy Americana. Yeah.
It works for anything. And honestly, I think that's a uniform of like the American Minuteman. Yeah.
Absolutely. I love it.
So
I think Grantham
do
would agree.
keep that in mind. Talk about other people. Get to know them. Be a mirror to them. Kind of keep it neutral unless you can be absolutely sure of what their views are. Because you can look at 3 different parties, people who are aligned to you or closely aligned to you. And with those people, you should be doing more like call to actions once you get to them. So like think of our community, like it's going to be less like political movement, more towards like, hey, do this thing.
Yeah.
That way you can keep some momentum going. Neutrals, those you got to be careful with, but you want to start moving them to their side. And then like just direct enemies who you should be gathering information from or softening their hearts. One way to do that is just do like acts of kindness for people. You can look at Francis Marion taking captives, and then like whether they were a private taken captive or like a captain, he'd feed them the same meal he was having and just get to know them as people, and just treat them with humanity. Erwin Rommel did the same thing. Numerous other leaders have, and it works quite well. Killing your enemies great and all, but making them quit their cause is even better.
Right.
And even better than that is making them convincing them to join your cause.
Oh yeah.
I mean, if you have that, like, not only has the enemy lost one, you've gained one. It's a net of two.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you've won over a massive amount of intelligence at that point. That's why, like, look at governments. I mean, all the major governments, China, Russia, America, they all try to get people to flip. They're always trying to get people that will what's the word? I can't think of the word when defect.
Turncoat.
They're trying to get defectors. Yeah, turncoat. Yeah, that's we pour so much time, money, and assets into that because it's huge. Yeah.
I mean, there's even been cases of like Hegelic dialect isn't necessarily the correct term for this, but you'll see where I'm coming from. Of like, you'll have a king and he captures like an enemy politician or executive or something. And, he has this guy set it up so that it looks like the king's not a part of this, and the guys, like the king's men, will like set it up and be like, "Hey, we're going to execute you." And right before they execute this politician, the king steps in and goes, "Hey, what the hell's going on here? I'll have none of this. This guy is a guest." Takes the enemy politician and he's like, "Hey, I'm so sorry these guys were treating you this way. Like, you don't deserve to be killed. Please come into my dining room. I'll make you like a sweet meal." And this guy who was just about to die is now like looking at this king like he's his savior.
Yeah.
And now will basically do anything this guy wants.
Right. Dang.
So there's like different ways to do something like that where you can basically set someone up. Here's an easier example, right? I have a guy I don't like, and I have one of my buddies. I have one of my buddies run to this guy I don't like in a town, and just like, you can have a couple of your buddies do this and just start mugging him. And then you step in as a guardian angel to come save this guy's life. Like, that guy's gonna love you the rest of his fucking life. He doesn't have to know a thing.
Yeah.
So
just make sure those buddies don't just come around like the next team meeting. Like, wait a second. Like, yeah, no, yeah, was.
So obviously you have to be careful about it. But
yeah.
Like there's ways to do things like that.
Right.
And then, just one thing is like a setup. The other is showing humanity.
Yep.
Like genuine humanity without any kind of deception involved. So you have those three groups and just looking at how do you want to approach each one and looking at it like tactics. Yeah.
Yep.
It's one thing to approach someone who disagrees with you and just start attacking them with a frontal assault, but it doesn't work very well. What's always more effective is attacking from the rear or the flank. So looking at conversation like that. So let's get into the one role we all want to talk about, the sniper.
Yes. That's what we've been waiting for.
He shoots things very far away. The end.
All right, moving on to the next role. No.
No, but this one could be a single guy or a pair. Again, it depends on the assets you have on hand. It depends what resources you have. At the end of the day, like, don't just look at this guy as a trigger puller. Like,
yeah,
you need a guy who can also just look at shit. Like, you don't know what to attack if you don't know what's out there. So being able to recognize human, what's the word I'm looking for? Heuristics.
Mm-hmm.
So if a bunch of guys come walking out of the club, how do I tell who's the leader of that group? How do I tell if someone is a leader? Does he have a posse? What's his gait like? What's he dressed like? What does this say about his backstory, his history? What kind of jewelry or accessories does he wear? Are his guys calm or are they more aggressive? What leadership style does he take? So being able to look through an optic or from afar or even close range and being able to discern those things is really important. As is being able to shoot far. That's great. But shouldn't need really elaborated on. Being able to sneak into places being able to set up a hide. Not everything necessarily needs bug netting, but netting does definitely help hide you. Knowing how sound affects sound works around your environment. So, like if I'm in a city, knowing how sound bounces off buildings might be useful to know. How to hide that sound within the building, because if people are still in that building and you take a shot, like probably need to get the fuck out of there pretty soon, or be able to hide that sound well. So you need a really independent thinker. If you plan on setting up a hidden site one place and it's just not going to work out, like you need to be creative. And being able to sneak into these places, like how are you going to get a rifle or kit into a place that maybe you're not supposed to be in?
Yeah.
Like, no one's talking about that. You don't have a full platoon of Marines to walk you into a building and then you just do a stay behind. Like, that's not going to work for you.
Yeah.
Like, I hate to burst your bubble. Like, you might have to talk your way into an apartment and find your way into a room. You might have to find some grassy knoll that's hidden behind barbed wire gate. Like, you're going to have to get creative and have the tools to do that. Not just the physical ones, but the social ones as well. Everyone wants to talk about the trigger pulling. No one wants to talk about how you get to the trigger pulling.
And that's the hardest part. So the trigger pulling is pretty easy.
Yeah, and then we could talk about like costumes.
Yeah.
Do you look like a UPS driver? Yeah, you could probably get in fucking anywhere. Do you look like an Uber Eats driver? Yeah, you could probably get in anywhere. Maybe. Do you know how tough is that security at the place you're trying to get to?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're not just, if you're just a random dude and you are in an environment where you do have to sneak some kind of precision platform into an environment like that, like you're rarely going to be allowed to just cruise around with a big duffel bag. You know what I mean? Like it goes beyond just like, oh, well, I'll just take my, my DMR build or my bolt gun, my 21-inch barrel bolt gun, and stick it in this rifle case. It's like, no, like if you have an established presence of some kind and you're having to operate around some kind of a dominant presence, they're going to stop people like that and be like, what do you have? Like that draws eyes. I mean, it's even from some of my experience in overseas, like you see stuff like that and it's like, hey, what is that? And you stop stuff like that. So understanding that you like things like you said, costumes, that's so valuable to understand and to practice and I think even pursue, because now you can get away maybe with like, oh, I've got a box, or, I've got this, I've got that. And then even looking into like a multiple,
I'm a construction worker with a laser level.
Or multiple people where it's like, hey, this guy's got the upper receiver, this guy's got the lower, and or whatever, or it's all broken up. I mean, those kind of tactics have been used forever too, where it's like this guy's got all these tools, this guy's got these, and then we all have to meet in this one location.
So let's take an example. You're a soldier. You stop me on the road because I look suspicious. I'm dressed in a suit. I have this weird long briefcase. You go, hey man, what are you doing? I say, oh hey man, I got to run to a meeting right now. I just start talking you out. Like, sorry, I got to run right now, and I doze off. Versus I freeze there.
Yeah.
And I like do that. You immediately know something's off.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah. So it's like if you look like you belong, you belong. So if I like talk your ear off, and just like, hey man, I got a meeting. I'm on the phone right now. Can you talk later or whatever? And just like act like you're a nuisance to me.
Yeah.
And just fucking flip the script. Like, dog, I got to do this thing. Like you're fucking annoying me. Get on my face. Like you'd be like, Jesus, all right, whatever.
Just turn into an NPC.
Okay, dude.
Yeah, you just turn into a stormtrooper. Move along. It's like, yes.
Yeah, it's like being able to do that in a situation like that, it's completely different, right?
Yep, for sure.
So like if you're, some guy immediately you stop a guy and he immediately starts trying to like it becomes a nuisance to you. He's trying to sell you stuff, trying to sell you like kebabs or something, and you're like, all right, get out of my face.
Yeah.
So being able to flip the script is a good social tool to have. Because a lot of guys will probably say like, this getting into places, that's gonna be really difficult, as is getting out of places. but they see the danger that's involved with a situation like this, and it paralyzes them. And it's like, yeah, this is dangerous. Like, I don't know what to tell you, man. Like, shit ain't easy.
Yeah.
Especially with a team like this, like all odds are stacked against you.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to be really, really slick. And then you obviously set up a hide, do your reconnaissance. Maybe that's the time to bring an RTO for some of that electronic reconnaissance, but it's really going to be depend on what you're trying to do. And then if you have a guy, who could do the short range kind of stuff and stiff arm an enemy away, like the Sakari can, and then you have another guy who can hit them from really far away, like that puts an enemy in a really precarious situation. Like, shit, we had a perimeter of like 200 meters. We just got shot from 800. Like, that completely changes someone's ball game. So think of like, you have that mansion on a hill, and they have that perimeter of like 300 meters, and you shot from 1,000. Like, that completely changes someone's like security personnel's like headspace. Like, oh shit, like they could be anywhere. So being able to kind of do those two things of, stiff arm, keep them close, opens up a little more options for you. And maybe during a whole operation, you do nothing kinetic. It's just being able to gather intelligence, which shouldn't be understated. Intelligence is super valuable.
Yeah.
And then the guy's got to be able to take a shot and get out of there.
Right.
So suppressors definitely help a lot. Maybe you're doing something close and you use subsonic in suppressors. That's definitely an option. But again, you're closer, so you have less time and space to run away. How are you going to exfil? Are you going to be looking like a hot, sweaty mess, or are you going to be cool, calm, collected, walking out of there with purpose and intention? You can even be the false flagger who calls in everything that just happened and pin it on some poor fool.
Yep.
You call in a description like, hey, this guy's wearing camis, he just ran out. I think he has a hostage, and you're just walking out in a freaking business suit. Like, now this institution that's reacting is false information.
Yeah.
They're immediately going to react to, because they're going to jump on the first thing they can get.
Yep.
So you got to be crafty. Like this, every one of these guys has to be crafty. You got to be able to think outside the box, and think ahead. Like, if I do X, what does enemy do? If I do Y, what does enemy do? If he does Y, what should I do? And being able to think like ahead through processes, like enemy most likely course of action. Like, that's what that is in the intelligence process. So that way you can start planning ahead. Like, hey, if I attack him here, he's going to do this, and then I can do this. It opens up all these different things, right? Boxers think the same way. Hey, if I throw a jab, he's going to do this. I can throw a hook. He'll do this. So, craftiness and thinking ahead.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's so it's so complex. Like the sniper topic. I mean, this whole thing is obviously complex, but so many people I think fall into the misunderstanding that like snipers is just wearing ghillie suits and having face paint on and like stalking around in the prone. And yes, like that is part of the discipline, but that's a very specific niche militaristic part of that discipline.
Yeah.
There is even historically, there's way more examples of a sniper being used in that more kind of clandestine fashion rather than just being ghillied up, on a ridge somewhere. Like it's the skills that you've been talking about up until this point that actually make that possible.
Yeah,
it's not as simple as just being a good shooter.
This whole group is just one way to approach a problem,
right?
But people should definitely consider like, hey, again, like my conventional army, based fire team, like it's got its niche, but it's somewhat limited in what it's capable of. And this gives guys who are like a small group, like, shit, if we had like some big force, what are we gonna do? Here's an option.
Yep. Yeah, we did a podcast recently on sniper teams or like sniper cells. And yeah, exactly. I think it ties in really nicely with this idea. And I think if you're listening to this and you're like, oh man, like we've been practicing infantry tactics, that's not bad. I think it's a great, it's a great place to build chemistry with a group of guys.
Yeah.
absolutely fundamental stuff to know. Like, you should still know and have those skills. But I think just accepting too that, like, hey, the reality that I might use this stuff versus some of these other things is probably a lot less down the totem pole of possibilities, rather than some of these other ones, which are very commonplace. It's things that we can even use in our day to day, not the sniping, but the, like the social skills and stuff like that.
And looking at the broader concepts, like setting up a patrol base, well, maybe it doesn't look like finding a site in the woods. Maybe it looks like setting up a patrol base inside of a house.
Yeah.
Like, that's like what this could be based off of. Like, that's what you're operating out of. That's the classic example I always think of, like setting up in a house. Like, how do we organize like cleaning, food, water? How do we organize security? Like, that's like just not thinking of like the specifics of it, looking at the bigger concept that's being done and like how that's organized. You can tell me learning to shoot with guys and how to coordinate fires is bad? Absolutely not. Like, that's awesome. Like, that opens so many options up, especially for like ambushes. Knowing how to assault, flank, and break contact, like absolutely a time and place. Maybe you guys are about to exfil the whole town and you just get caught in a shitty situation. Yeah, you better know how to freaking shoot around each other and break contact. Like, you should know how to do these things. Yeah, it's like once you have these base skills down, like start opening your mind. Like, hey, what I'm training is also limited. Let me open up some more options for myself.
Yeah, and that's just what I was about to say, is like finding the basics with your infantryman skills. It's like kind of looking at how Green Berets train. They learn the infantryman skills before they go on to Q course and start learning in different languages and whatever specific skill set that they take on. First they learn the infantryman skills, and that's kind of where they get their base, and then they can expand off of that. That's the same thing that you can do as a Minuteman. So you learn your infantryman skills, and then you expand off that once you have the basics down.
So I've done a lot of talking, but I want to hear like what questions do you guys have? What are like thoughts that come to mind with like looking at this?
I gotta like, if I can go first, Jake.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you said that with your page, kind of your main intent is to pique people's interest in these topics and then push them to resources. So I guess my question to you would be like, what's some good resources for maybe like where to start for each one of these roles? Like, what's a good book to read for each one of these roles? Like, if someone's listening and they're like, hey, you know what? I think I'm the RTO. I think that fits me really well. Where can I start? If you have it. I mean, I'm not saying that you have like the perfect reading information, but.
So with RTOs, I'm going to refer everyone to like YouTube University, Terminal Armament, Comms Logistics, all of those comms nerds on Instagram, because they are experts in that field. I am not. I am like a caveman when it comes to radio. I think it's literally witchcraft, and it should be burned at the cross. No, but it's
go back to smoke signaling.
It's magic to me. Yeah. Whereas, those guys are experts in their field. I'm going to leave that to them. I know ham radio crash course is a great one. Basically, a lot of things are going to be asked for you in that role, so you're going to need to be creative in your learning and a big tinkerer. That's the biggest thing I can give for that. With Sakari, Book of Ninja, well, it's a little dry, but it'll give you some ideas of what they did, and that will lead you to further information. Ed Calderon will be a good one for that one as well. Become a man of the streets. Be good with your handgun. Be good with knives. Be good with your hands. Be crafty. Lock picking would be great as well. Pickpocketing, probably not bad.
A little bit harder to figure out.
But, things like that. Think of like your street skills.
Yeah.
Right? That's what I would focus on for that. Sniper field manuals, YouTube University, Fry the Brain, FM 3.05222. That's usually the easiest, most recent one. I think it was 04, but it's easy to get your hands on. And that gives you a good idea of how to approach things. For any social skills, how to win friends and influence people, 48 Laws of Power. Those two will get you really good. There's also some YouTube University stuff. Take that with a grain of salt.
Yep.
Definitely take it with a grain of salt. And then just like getting out and practicing with people, like that's the biggest thing you could do, especially with thinking on your feet.
Yeah.
You really just got to do it. But sniper skills, like go out and train, if you don't know you're dope, like
Get out there.
Doing?
Yeah.
You're gonna die in the streets. You don't know you're dope.
Yeah. We actually got Fry the Brain right there, donated by Brown Rocket.
Yep.
Sitting there on our
in the DDS
library behind you there.
Yeah.
But
it's a good one.
I'm still waiting on the news to pick that up.
Yeah.
I can't wait.
Local terrorist groups are using a book called Fry the Brain now. It just goes a terrible direction.
Fry the Brain sales are up 12,000%.
Yeah. Yeah, a question I'd have would be, what do you think an ideal team number is, or range? I think you've mentioned a couple times maybe a possible number range, but a lot of people always want to know, like, hey, I've got this many. What is this possible with? What would you say an ideal number would be for this concept?
So if we're just using this, I always come to think, I mean, it depends how you want to implement it, and each person's going to find a different way to do it. Maybe they could do it with 50 guys, and by all means do that. Like you shouldn't follow someone else's theory if you find a better way to do it that actually works. But I always think of like, hey, how many people can I get in like an SUV or in one car, 1 to 2 cars? That's usually like 4 to 6.
Yep.
And that's kind of what I want to work with. However, if you want to add like a more like PR team to this, where they just do like public stuff, where you have like a medic who works with like individuals in the community who are hurt, another leader, more like media teams, stuff like that, where you just have like a more PR based team. So you have like a overt and covert organization. Definitely by all means do that. A lot of guys, I've gotten a lot of pushback from this. They're like, well, I'm a medic, I should be with this team. And it's like, no, the fuck you shouldn't. And here's why. You're, as a medic, the most valuable personnel. Why would I put you in harm's way?
Yeah.
Well, people get hurt. Yeah, people get hurt, and they're probably going to die. Like, that's what this shit is. Like, I don't know what you want me to tell you. Like, but you are the most valuable guy. To get your skills takes so much time and energy to get. It is always so understaffed. And they will probably be pulled so many different directions to help with others. Like, why would I attach you for a what-if scenario because you're the most valuable guy? Like, medics are attached to platoons, 50 guys, not 5.
Yeah.
And I respect the desire to want to be there in the shit, but at the end of the day, like, you are too valuable to put in harm's way.
For sure.
Like that's my stance, and I will not move from that, period. Like, if they want to do that, by all means, go for it. But I'm going to advise against that.
I would wholeheartedly agree with you, and the biggest reason I'd agree with you is because that is not just a valuable asset, but it's an educational asset. And all the pre-hospital, like, keep you alive skills, they're actually pretty freaking easy. And it's stuff that I get frustrated. I'm passionate about the medical side. I get frustrated because everyone should be pursuing that. To at least the level of basic pre-hospital, basic life support, blood in the body, keep them breathing, prevent shock, the really basic things. Anybody can learn that. It's super simple. And then absolutely exfil, if possible, to that medic person that is highly valuable, has skills that took literal years, sometimes over a decade to master. And then they've got a better chance. I actually, that's a great specific example of like utilization and protection of like valuable personnel assets.
And that kind of like thinking big and thinking small. Like, that's thinking small. And again, I am not dissing on these guys. I just need them to think like you're a general. Do you want to send a platoon full of medics into harm's way? No, because that would be a terrible use of resources. Now, if you had like a large group doing this and you wanted to set up like a mini field hospital, like, I want those kinds of guys there. If you had like 50 to 100 guys like assaulting, position, like, I probably want a couple medics, left into that unit, just hanging around the back helping out. Yeah, absolutely. But we're talking like small groups here that need to be lean. And I can't have guys that are so valuable and just put in harm's way. So that's like one example of like something I would not do under any circumstance if I could help it.
Another question I thought of, and it's actually kind of been a reoccurring audience question or listener question. And And we'll probably do our own podcast about it at some point. But man, we've been asked so many times in the last little while about bolt guns and good bolt gun setups. Do you think that's a good pairing with the sniper kind of clandestine role, or what are your thoughts on as far as the specific weapon platform, since a lot of people want to know about that?
So I'm very utilitarian. I'm going to use whatever I can use for the specific job. I don't really attach myself to specific things. For me, I like gas guns because I like to be able to fight with them. Yep. But by all means, I think bolt guns are phenomenal. They're a lot more affordable. To get something good in a bolt gun is like multitudes less than something good in a gas gun.
Right.
And I think they're phenomenal platforms. I love them. I absolutely love them. They're very accurate, especially the good stuff. You can keep the brass in the chamber if you're really concerned about forensics. You get those long barrels, like there's great barrels out there like Bartlein and all that, and like they could just be tack drivers. So like I was like Granite Rifle Group, if you just want an out of the box solution that's very affordable. Otherwise, I'm going to recommend Tika. If you're just freaking balling out, like get an MRAD. But like there's a lot of options out there. If you're questioning about calibers for a bolt gun, like I probably go 308. And the reason for this is just a little more affordable. The military uses it quite a bit. So it's easy to find. It's easy to find in other people's like houses and stuff. Yeah. You know, it's a very common caliber. It teaches you how to use the wind. It's good out to at least 800 meters. You can shoot farther than that, but minimum is 800 meters. And if you could shoot that well, like you can shoot anything well. Like using 6.5, 300 normal mag, like that's all going to be like cheating for you because it's going to be like a freaking laser beam. Right. But if you want to get 6.5 or something like that, like by all means, go for it. Like it's a great caliber.
Yeah. Yeah, the West Coast is definitely, I mean, you're definitely going to find 308 everywhere, pretty much, because anywhere that there's bear country, you're pretty much going to find, you have a good chance of finding 308 at any house. If not 30-06 or something, you know, close to that.
But just learning how to scrap, like use what you got. Like 5.56, like a lot of snipers are using 5.56 because they can fight with it. You'll see these systems now, a lot with the Green Berets, I think, are using it. I forgot which unit. But they got like an M4, like block 3, I think it is now, block 2, block 3, and they'll have like this Night Force, like big ass scope on it with like a laser rangefinder on top. And it's just because like they're shooting close distances, they're sniping with it, and then they're fighting their way out of like a house or towards an objective. Yeah. So they're kind of getting a platform that can do both. And a lot of guys like to look at things like they're black and white, and it's like you're just dealing with trade-offs, right? 5.56, I can shoot a lot, it's cheap, but I'm sacrificing energy and the build. Like when I talk about range, I mean like accurately hitting things consistently. Yeah. Like with an 85% hit probability. Like you're probably limited to about 600 meters for an 85% hit probability. It could be longer with different barrel lengths, bullets, and shooters, but for simplicity, we'll say that versus like 308 carries 3 to 5 times the energy as 5.56 and is generally good for 800 meters. Before it starts getting thrashed around in the wind. But you know, use what you got. Like the RA used AR-18s, the DC shooters, rest in piss to them, used AR-15s. Like use what you got and know its capabilities, like to its fullest extent. Like a rifle doesn't do you any good if you've only shot to 100. Like, are you really going to understand what your bullet's doing in the wind? No. So, you know, if you're going to use a 300 blackout suppressed for sniping, by all means, there's a time and place for that. Just understand its weaknesses, the pros, cons. Like, it's going to be stupid quiet. No one's going to know where you shot from, but that's a short range weapon.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that all comes back to something you said earlier about dope, like know your dope. And there's no excuse for that. I think like that's the fun part too. That's what I always say. Like that should be the fun part, going out and figuring it out, intentionally trying challenging engagements or just varying engagements in different conditions, taking detailed note of that. We want to come out with more content on that later. There's a lot that already exists. I'm sure you have content you've either done in your previous pages or plan to do again. So there's a lot of places to go find information on that. I think a lot of people hear that and they're just like, I don't even know where to begin. And it's literally like, start with your 0 and then get a baseline and then go out and shoot in different parameters, like set yourself up in different conditions, like different ranges, different temperatures and just shoot and then record what's happening. Like,
it's going to be
simple as
multiple
that.
days and different times of the year.
Yeah.
So
it's going to take, a good dope book is made over, sometimes years. I mean, and there's no excuse to not be doing it. I think, graduating, and I do say graduating because I don't want to downplay its importance, but graduating out of like the 50 yard and in flat range shooting, I think is important. That, again, I say graduating because that's important to know. Understanding how to manipulate your weapon system and move quick and shoot in and out of cover with kit on and off. These are all things that a lot of people get stuck talking about in the current gun culture. But I think graduating out of that and getting more into like what can I do at 600 meters? What can I do at 250 meters with like 7 mile an hour winds from left to right? Things like that. I mean, these are things that you don't want to be just fudging through in the moment. These are things that you want to know.
And think about what that offers you. Like, let's say you could push past the standard anticipated range of your platform. So, like, you can accurately hit 600 with your AR-15 with a 14-inch barrel. Yeah, and you're dope. Like, maybe you're not a PRS style shooter, but like, you're dope pretty well. Like, you're solid. Like, maybe you're not hitting that 6-inch plate all the time, but you're training, you're aim small, miss small on these small plates, and now you're faced with a human silhouette presented in front of you, and your enemy doesn't even know what drop happens after 100 meters, let alone if the rifle's zeroed.
Yeah,
like, dude, that is just like stiff arming the short kid at school and just wailing on them. Because they're just incapable of hitting back accurately, and like, you're one shot, boom, done, let's get out, and they're just freaking AKs over the head, shooting in the air. Like, it's just such a powerful thing. You save on the ammo, you're precise with your fires, and you're just getting more done with less. So like, and it's like, this is your platform. Like, I should be able to know, as I'm holding up the AR-10, like, I should know everything about this.
Sexy.
Like, there should be no excuse, because I own it. Like, I need to know it inside and out, before I like start moving on to other platforms. Because it doesn't do any good if you don't.
Absolutely.
A lot of guys want to give themselves excuses. Like, I can't find a range. Like, you just need to go out and talk with people, because there's always something out there. Unless maybe if you're in New York City, you got to drive far, whatever. Move out of there.
Yeah.
But
get out.
There's always something. Like, if you got one guy brought up like ranches, like, just get to know the rancher around you. And then another guy's like, well, how do I do that? I don't know where their mailing address is. I was like, you got Onyx Hunt? And he's like, yeah. I said, okay, look up who owns the property. I said, okay, where do I mail it to? I said, you got White Pages online? He's like, yeah. I was like, go search it on there. Like, there's everything on the internet. Like, you just got to be willing to find it. And just getting to know people around town from different areas, like, you will find something.
Yeah,
absolutely. And a lot of times it's a good way to network into a like mind. It's like, before you know it, you're shooting on this guy's property and you're, hey, let's meet up for some beers, and things are going good, and then you're sleeping together. No, I'm just kidding.
I didn't make eye contact. It's all right.
Oh, too far, overcorrection. No, but before you know it, it's like you guys are training together and shooting together, and maybe you're winning that person over into like, oh, dude, maybe I should get a more modern setup. I only have a 12 gauge or, whatever. And it's, I think being resourceful is a skill that needs to be, I know this wasn't the direction that we were going, but being resourceful is something that we all should be able to do. Like, we have the most powerful resources available in the internet nowadays. And it's like, you just gave this kind of litany of places people could go and be like, oh yeah, I have that. Oh yeah, I got that. Yeah. It's like, well, use it. Like, utilize this stuff, go out and figure it out. And, like you said, we can sit around and make excuses all day, but if we're just making excuses, then we're already setting ourselves up for failure. And I think if you think you're just going to be this successful hero and you're making excuses now about like, yeah, I can't go shoot because of this and that, then you're, I don't know, how successful are you going to actually be?
I mean, I'm not advocating for anything illegal. Please do not kick in my door. But like, get creative with where you shoot, and if you're not able to do that, maybe you should consider your capabilities.
Right. It's a great way to say that.
Yeah.
The end. Yeah. Yep.
The throwback to one time I shot out of an SUV in my neighborhood.
Theoretically.
Theoretically.
Yeah.
It was perfectly safe. I assure you it was perfectly safe. Like there was no one in any danger at any time.
Good.
It sounds way cooler than it actually was. But just get creative, be safe, think outside the box with that.
Yeah.
Sweet deal.
Did you have any other? I had another question.
Yeah, I had another question. As long as it's not related to the topic, I was gonna.
Oh, anything's fine.
No. I mean, I was making sure he didn't have anything.
My TBI's hit me right now.
Okay.
So I don't remember what it was.
I was just gonna ask. I guess like what's. I guess I mean you're kind of staying in the same. I guess since you just got your page deleted, kind of sucks. So you're probably gonna kind of put back some of the same information. But like, what is there to be expected? I guess for our audience that don't know who you are, and if you don't know who he is, definitely go give him a follow because he's got a ton of information.
Yeah, we'll link it below. So
a lot of information is just very simple. Like I want to keep it very simple. I don't want anything to be complex. It's going to cut a lot of the fluff. There might be some important details that are missing, but it's going to be like I just want it as bare bones and simple as possible. One is for Instagram. Two is like I can only capture your attention for so much time.
Yeah.
And three is just for understanding. So that way you can just pop, here's my bit of information for the day, boom, done. That's kind of what I aim to do. I don't like things that are complicated. I don't like things with a lot of fluff. Like just give me the information I need to know, bullet point it, cool, done, awesome. That way it's just digested by more people. And you'll get guys who like to write 30,000 paragraphs, and that's just not my style. All props to them. There's plenty of guys who put out good information, but I just want things simple. Like, here's your bullet point for the day. In the future, I'm still debating. Kind of got a little under the weather there after that because it was it's annoying. I like talking with people. I was like networking with people. So we'll see. I'm thinking a lot more like breakdowns of like events and things and lessons to be learned. Like I did a MiG-25 post, which is kind of like an interesting topic. And it was basically just talking about how like the MiG-25 was like a paper bear and that we shouldn't get barked up trees by like chihuahuas. And it kind of puts in the light the whole Cold War and how in certain aspects it was very much a joke. Look at like a lot of the tech. So things like that. I might break down a little bit like the Galapagos. God, I can't even pronounce it right now. Fuck, it's not even worth it. I'll break down some battles or stuff like that, and there's things to learn from those different events in history. I want to do more social stuff as well, but I'm just figuring out how to make it actually like appetizing online. So that's probably what we're gonna do, and then some more of like the same kind of stuff, and a lot of reposting here and there.
Do you have any other avenues other than IG, or is that just where you're at?
That's the main one. I do have a Telegram chat, which is just for like guys to connect with each other. There's the Patreon I have, which is I do more like discussions on that, some teaching here and there, and that's just like more like serious like one-on-one help. So like any of those guys can call me anytime, and I'll help them out. And then I have Twitter, but Twitter's just shit posting. Like that's that's the only thing I see it's good for. I thought about doing posting on that, but it's just like you're only limited to 140 characters or so, and it's just like you can't post much in here.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Any plans to do like anything on YouTube, like even if it's like a voiceover style, like educational content or anything like that?
I've been asked a lot, and for demonstration stuff, it's just a lot of time right now. If I did, it wouldn't be within the next 4 months. It would have to be after that. Voiceover, that's actually a really good idea. I haven't necessarily considered that yet. I would have to come in with a game plan. I wouldn't I can kind of wing the IG thing. I can just sit on the toilet and write something out, but like the YouTube, like that definitely takes time and effort to think through.
Yeah, for sure.
And then it's like, how thin am I going to spread myself? Like, obviously, the Patreon, like that's like there is money involved in that, but like that's just more so for people who want like serious chat.
Yeah, which is pretty limited, I'm sure.
Yeah, or just want to just support me, because everything I do is free. Like, I don't have a business.
Yeah.
Like, this is, not for profit. Like, this is for people. So like, I'm just concerned if I'll spread myself too thin.
Right. Yeah, you got to have margin too. I mean, it's kind of funny because we have a YouTube and we have like 6 videos on it, and they're all super like old school and kind of scripted. They're all medical, I think, based right now, I think is all we got on there. But yeah, when you first start, it's like, oh yeah, we're going to do this and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, the time is just, you only have so much of it. But yeah, I thought of the voiceover thing because you've got a solid tone voice where I think I could just envision like historical, like, hey, here's something to be learned. And yeah, it's just kind of what I envisioned, but that'd be cool. Man, I can't recall that other question, but
that's all right.
But yeah,
I guess if you got anything for us, feel free to hit us, but
no, I appreciate everything. Yeah, it's just if you had any questions about like the organization or questions about that or like anything tool related, stuff like that. So it's just so I can clear the air because I might have missed something about the whole hunter killer team.
Yeah, I think you broke it down super well.
Yeah.
It's very focused a lot on like some of those, I think, more under what some might consider underrated skills, even though I think they're super important, like the social skills, leadership skills, intelligence gathering skills, which I mean, in all honesty, we just scratched the surface on. But I think like the majority of people aren't thinking in that vein. So I really appreciate you breaking it down. It's a really good concept. I think it's a more realistic concept than, the British are coming, even though that's kind of the whole like model.
Well, you could even talk about that, like the whole British were coming thing. That was an intelligence network set up beforehand.
Yeah,
for that, like they had everything down. So when they did come, that the entire militia could get together and then arm and defense. Like it was simple, but it was like complex at the same time. Like we could talk about like that. Like you're not just going to run out of your house and mount defense. Like there was a network put together ahead of time.
Right? Yeah.
With contingencies.
Yeah. I actually did just think of my question. It wasn't topic related as much, but I'm curious on where do you kind of feel that the gun community culture kind of is now, and do you think we're heading in the right direction? And like, what do you think the community can kind of do to be more prepared and look at this kind of more full circle?
Yes and no to the right direction. Okay. Yes, as in like the gun community is really new. I would say like it's really only since like 2016, and maybe a little before that when you start seeing like EDC stuff. So we're still working out the kinks. We're still pushing out like the cancerous people, or the people who have ingrained themselves and attached themselves to guns, but aren't 2A or the modern Minuteman oriented. So we're still pushing those kinds of people out. So it's natural, and we care. All of us care very much about the right information being put out. So when we see bad stuff, bad tools, bad information, like we get pissed, and rightfully so. Like that's what it is. I see a lot of guys training, doing the right stuff, networking. Maybe their training's not perfect, but they're at least putting in the effort. Their heart's in it. I love that. That's great. We're getting the tools for force multiplying. That's awesome. I would say that we're lacking a lot of social finesse. We're still kind of hung up on the critical thinking aspect in the whole leadership thing. Like, stop looking for people to lead you. Be the leader you need. There's this theory called great man theory, and it's kind of pushed off by the communists and the Nazis. Like, hey, in any time of crisis, a great man comes to save us, and it always ends up being a dictator who kills shitloads of people for their own selfish goals. If you expect a great man to come, you're going to get a tyrant who's going to put a boot on your neck. Stop expecting the great man to come and be the great man you need. No one's coming to save you, period. So like embody that. Learn how to talk to people. Like, my God. And everything you do is either making people's lives better or worse. Like, you got to understand that your actions have consequences. Yeah. So like slow down a little and just thank people for their time.
Yeah.
That's what I would have to say. But overall, I see a lot of good things. I will comment on a lot of negative things, but overall, my views are completely hopeful and positive. I just want to address the negative things so we can, keep focusing on progression.
Yeah.
But I see so many good things. Like it just like kinetically, like, just get your dope, know how to shoot far. My God, like, it's your tool, know how to use it.
Yeah.
Be in shape, eat healthy, stop eating seed oils. And, just be good to your neighbors and just love people, and you will reap way more than you sowed.
Yeah.
Dang, dude. Well, I think that's quite the spot to end it, man. I really appreciate you taking the time. I'm thankful you got your page back up and running. That will be linked in our description. I'm also going to try to go through and link some of the resources that Reaper shared with us today in the description. So if you're listening and you want to scroll down there and do the easy route and click on some links, be resourceful, go down there and click on those links. I'll try to get everything we talked about in there. But thanks a lot, man. It's awesome meeting you and getting to talk with you, and such a cool topic. And if you're interested in this topic and you're like, man, that was something, it's like, that's just one topic that Reaper shares on his page. So he's got all kinds of content that goes every which way, and it's all very, very applicable in my opinion. So big thanks, man, for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Of course. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate that.
Oh yeah.
We'll talk again sometime else, I guess. We'd love to have you back on. So if that ever works out and we don't keep you up too late, the time difference is definitely a thing. But
I'd love to come back on.
Yeah, that'd be great.
All righty. Well, we'll catch up with you next time.